Welcome back. It's July 2nd, and throughout the course of today, we're going to be doing a series of programs. If you're just tuning in, I'm Dr. James Broomall, Associate Professor of History at Shepherd University, as well as the Director for the George Heather Moore Center for the Study of the Civil War. And I'm very pleased to welcome this morning's guest, Dana Shoaf, who's editor of Civil War Times.
Morning, everybody.
You can probably pick up on some of the noise from the Hanover Road. We apologize, but Dana has a really interesting program in store for us, and he's taking us to kind of seldom visited Brinkerhoff's Ridge. And so from here, I'm going to turn it over to Dana. We're going to talk a little bit about this area, what happened here, and how it connects to the larger struggle that's going to be unfolding at Culps Hill later on the 2nd.
How you doing, everybody? Just to give you a little, set the scene a little bit, we're about 3 miles east of the town square of Gettysburg, so we're on the eastern side of the town. And this story involves a very unusual unit that shouldn't even have been here at the Battle of Gettysburg that ended up having a small but consequential role in the fight. And that is Captain William Rank's section, or 2 cannons, of the 3rd Pennsylvania Heavy Artillery. Now, Rank's gunners are going to end up fighting with the cavalry, so it doesn't make sense from the beginning, because heavy artillerymen usually man those massive cannons that you see in the big fortifications that are around Washington and along the East Coast. The 3rd Pennsylvania Heavy Artillery is a large regiment, and it's based out of Baltimore, administered by the Middle Department. It's not part of the Army of the Potomac. And William Rank, in early June of '63, was given 2 3-inch ordnance rifles. Those are light field pieces with about 55 men, and he was sent south of Frederick, Maryland, which is roughly an hour's drive south of Gettysburg, if you're driving in a modern sense. They were to guard a spur of the B&O Railroad where it ran into Frederick. But, of course, things changed rapidly in late June when Jeb Stewart undertakes his notorious ride around the Union Army that's going to cause Robert E. Lee and the Army in Northern Virginia so many problems. So Stewart crosses the Potomac, and Rank gets orders from Baltimore to get out of there because he's going to get captured. So he hitches up his cannons, his 2 3-inch ordnance rifles, and his men make it into Carroll County, Maryland, which is just east of Frederick County, Maryland, or Frederick. And they hide out and wait there until Stewart's men pass. They come back out of hiding, and they're heading back to Frederick, but they ran into elements of the 6th Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Now, the 6th Corps was on the far right flank of Meade's army as they're moving up through Maryland. So they run into 6th Corps, and Rank doesn't specify who he runs into, but he says it was 6th Corps soldiers, and he's passed off from them to Brigadier General David McMurtry Gregg, who commands a cavalry division in the Army of the Potomac. Gregg says, "You're not going back to Frederick. We need all the help we can get. You're going to come with my cavalry." And of course, I'm paraphrasing. And coincidentally, 3-inch ordnance rifles were the kind of cannons Union cavalry favored because they're relatively light as far as field pieces go. Okay. They're much lighter than Napoleon's or the bronze cannons. So they work well with cavalry. And I think that's why he got assigned to this cavalry. And then Gregg assigns Rank and his gunners to Colonel John McIntosh's cavalry brigade. Okay? So they end up getting caught up in this Gettysburg storm, and they're brought here to Gettysburg. They end up here along the Hanover Road, according to Rank, in the forenoon of July 2nd, in the morning before noon. Now, to our west, about a mile west of here, is Brinkerhoff's Ridge, and that was the far flank of the Army of Northern Virginia. On top of Brinkerhoff's Ridge is the Stonewall Brigade, the famous Stonewall Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General James Walker. So they're on top of that ridge, and there had been a succession of Union troops out here on July 2nd. There were some 12th Corps soldiers. They get pulled off to some other area. There were some soldiers from the 5th Corps. They get moved off. So it ends up to Gregg's cavalry division to fill in that area and keep skirmishing with the Stonewall Brigade up on Brinkerhoff's Ridge. So Gregg sets up Rank's cannons, one on each side of the Hanover Road, right at the location of their monument, which you can see here. And you can see, if you might come out here to tour the battlefield, why it might be confusing. Battery H, 3rd Pennsylvania Heavy Artillery. What are they doing out here, right? Heavy artillery. So There's one cannon roughly here and one across the road. And Gregg actually orders the gun on the right side of the road where we're standing to fire a shot at a knot of mounted Confederate officers he sees on the road on top of Brinkerhoff's Ridge. So the lanyard is pulled, the shell goes off, call it beginner's luck, call it skill. That shell bursts precisely over those Confederate officers. And when it does, they scatter, okay? And from that point on, Ranks gunners are heavily involved out here firing on Brinkerhoff's Ridge. The 3rd Pennsylvania Cavalry is going to dismount and charge up Brinkerhoff's Ridge to try to capture a stone wall. And they're in a race with troops of the Stonewall Brigade to get that stone wall. Ranks gunners fire at the Stonewall Brigade troops and slow them down, and the 3rd PA Cavalry wins that race to the stone wall. So they're very effective out here. Well, how does this impact the battle? And it does have an impact because Major General Edward Allegheny Johnson is going to attack Culps Hill, and Jim's going to talk about that in more detail in just a little bit. They're going to attack Culps Hill after dusk in the early evening, and he starts forming his troops up to do so, and he wants to bring the Stonewall Brigade into that attack. And Walker says, we can't do it. We're facing strong resistance from infantry, which there weren't any infantry at the time, cavalry and artillery out here, and we can't leave the ridge. We got to protect our flank here. So Johnson agrees and says wait until after dark. So Walker's men don't withdraw for that attack until after dark, and by then it's too late for them to participate in the assault on Culps Hill. And if you study the battle, you know the Confederates, as Jim will point out later, really broke the Union line up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's so interesting about Dana's story is that we're in an area that visitors seldom even consider, yet it has this essential role in one of the more famous fights of the battle at the area of Culps Hill. I mean, these two things are interlocked so importantly in how the action unfolds on July the 2nd.
I'm sorry. There was a deer that was just, okay. So, I'm sorry, Jim.
Yep.
A deer just got hit on the road down the street from us. Sorry, folks. It's live TV. So anyway, yes, it impacts the battle, and they can't go up. And by the time that breakthrough takes place, they're not around. And 1,600 men, you don't know, right?
Right. And that is one of the areas on the 2nd where the battle is extraordinarily close, where Confederates do take the lower slope, the lower works. And we don't like to play what-if scenarios, but the importance here is that how this piece of the action fits into that piece of the action.
Yes, it really is sort of amazing. These guys aren't even supposed to be here, and this happens. So after July 2nd, Ranks gunners are moved to the west, and they'll actually take part in firing on Pickett's charge. So they have that participation in the battle as well. And just a brief background on Rank. His parents were Irish immigrants. They ran a hardware store in Philadelphia. He's about 25 years old when the Battle of Gettysburg is fought. After the Battle of Gettysburg, this section of any more action the rest of the war. But even though they're not part of the Army of the Potomac, they still could proudly call themselves veterans of the Battle of Gettysburg. Rank actually will die in 1872. He dies very young of disease.
Okay.
So that's sort of wrapping up his story. So that's basically the story here. And this, if you get a chance, come out, check out this monument, because it's really an example of how fate impacts soldiers and brings them into battles that they have little control over.
Well, thank you so much, Dana. We're going to be hearing from Dana in a couple hours as we go to the area just to the north of Little Round Top. But thank you very much for exposing us to this kind of fascinating story and how it plays a central role in the battle that unfolds on July the 2nd.